Welcome back to Reading Children's Books with Kids Book Pub and publishing our children's stories. Today I have a fun book for you about a young boy who, well, there's a lesson in the story. So if you're ready to learn about this young man, join me as we read Chris Findlay's George the Turtle. And of course, if you enjoy the book, make sure that you give it a great big thumbs up and that you share it with your friends and family. A long time ago, on a dark winter's night, as I walked through the streets, all covered in white, I heard a little voice say, "Hey, listen here." A voice so quiet I could hardly hear. Hiding in the shadows, trying not to be seen, all I could see were his eyes shining green. He told me the story of someone he knew. A kind little boy, but a naughty one too. The boy's name was George, and he loved to have fun, even if everyone else had none. His parents grew tired. He drove them insane because every day they would tell George the same. "Finish your dinner and pick up your plate. Tidy your shoes. Don't stay up late." George never listened. He thought he was right. Boy, was he in for a bit of a fright. That night at dinner, when they sat down to eat, George kicked off his slippers and ate in bare feet. He spilled on the table, he spilled on the floor, and made even more mess than he'd ever done before. George didn't say, "Please," or "Thank you," or "Pardon." He just left a huge mess and ran out to the garden. He laughed and he smiled as he played with his ball, thinking, "Mommy and Daddy will tidy it all. My brothers will help them to tidy up too. But football is more fun, and that's what I will do." Then, all of a sudden, the ball began shaking. Smoke filled the garden. The earth started quaking. George could see nothing through the cloud of thick fog, until out of the midst hopped a giant green frog. The frog shouted, "George, you must do as you're told. Stop misbehaving and don't be so bold. If you want to be lazy and act like a pet, then I'll teach you a lesson you will never forget." So the frog closed his eyes and remembered a spell, and then he opened his frog lips and started to yell. "Abracadabra, alakazama! Listen to Papa and listen to Mama. Don't be so lazy and don't stay up late, or soon you will suffer a terrible fate." The garden stopped shaking. All the smoke cleared, and with a loud poof, the frog disappeared. "What did he mean?" thought George. "I'm not so bad. That giant green frog must be riveting mad." He thought to himself, "Well, I feel just the same." So he went back inside and did it all over again, making a mess like a pig in a pen, and staying up late until well after 10. Midnight came, and George was still messing around, leaving his shoes and his toys on the ground, when suddenly George felt a little bit strange. So he grabbed his pajamas, and he quickly got changed. He lay on his bed, and he fell straight to sleep, again leaving his shoes and clothes in a heap. The next day he woke up and couldn't turn around. He was stuck on his back, and he couldn't look down. His hands had turned green, and he cried out in fear, "I've grown a huge shell and a tail on my rear." He yelled to his parents, "I'm stuck in my bed." so embarrassed that his little green face had turned red. They ran through the door and screamed, "Look at your head!" shocked by his shell and his tiny green legs. For the next week or two, George got smaller and smaller, while everything else seemed to grow much taller. His family all ate like kings and like queens, leaving poor George to eat only lettuce and greens. This wasn't a life for a 6-year-old boy. He could play in his shell, but he couldn't play with his toys. "This isn't fair," exclaimed George in a huff. "At first it was fun, but now I've had enough." "Mama, I'm sorry." His turtle tears poured. "I don't want to look like a turtle anymore. I promise to be tidy and promise to eat. I promise I'll listen and go straight to sleep." His mom said, "I'm sorry, but what can we do? It wasn't your parents who did this to you." Not 1 second later, the ground began shaking, the earth started quaking, and the neighbors were waking. To George's relief, the green frog reappeared. George popped out of his shell and held back his tears and said, "Please, Mr. Frog, I will start to behave." The frog opened his mouth, and what a chuckle he gave. He laughed and said, "Oh, George, look at your face." George stared back at him with a look of disgrace. The frog laughed so hard that he huffed and he panted. He took a deep breath, and then after, he chanted, "Abracadabra, alakazama, listen to Papa and listen to Mama. Don't be so lazy and don't act so clever, or you will become George the Turtle forever." So what happened next, you ask? What did he do? Well, I'm afraid this is all that I have for you. You see, the story was cut short and I had to leave, and a big magic frog? That's hard to believe. The end. If you enjoyed the story today, again, please give it a great big thumbs up and share it with your friends and family. And if you would, leave in the comments section a note for the author, Mr. Chris Findlay, and let him know what your favorite part about the book was.